Hello, I am editor Than Mai. I will provide you with the latest information of the day. US envoy says Syria and Israel agree to ceasefire as Druze minority and Bedouin clans clash in Syria. U.S. Envoy to Syria Tom Barak said early Saturday that Israel and Syria had agreed to a ceasefire following Israel's intervention this week in fighting between Syrian government forces and rival armed groups. The announcement came as renewed clashes erupted between Druze groups and Bedouin clans, and Syria's president said he would send troops back in to quell the fighting, which has left tens of thousands of people displaced in a worsening humanitarian crisis, Barak said in a statement posted on social platform X that the new ceasefire between Israel and Syria was supported by Turkey, Jordan and other neighboring countries, and called for Druze, Bedouins, and Sunnis to put down their weapons and together with other minorities build a new and united Syrian identity in peace and prosperity with its neighbors. He did not share any details on the agreement. Israel attacked Syrian forces to protect the Druze minority. Clashes began Sunday between Druze militias and local Sunni Muslim Bedouin tribes in Syria's southern Swayda province. Government forces intervened, nominally to restore order, but ended up taking the Bedouins' side against the Druze. Israel intervened in defense of the Druze, launching dozens of airstrikes on convoys of government fighters, and even striking the Syrian Defense Ministry headquarters in central Damascus. The Druze form a substantial community in Israel, where they are seen as a loyal minority and often serve in the Israeli military. The fighting killed hundreds of people over 4 days, with allegations that Syrian government-affiliated fighters executed Druze civilians and looted and burned homes. On Wednesday, the Syrian government reached a truce with Druze groups, mediated by the US, Turkey and Arab countries, and began withdrawing its forces from the province. Under the accord, Druze factions and clerics were to maintain the internal security in Swayda, as government forces pulled out. Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara said Thursday. Syria sends troops back in as more clashes erupt. By late Thursday, clashes were flaring again between the Druze and Bedouin groups in parts of Swayda province. And on Friday, al-Shara said that the government would send in a specialized force to break up clashes and resolve the conflict on the ground. Officials had negotiated with Druze factions on an agreement to re-enter the area to impose stability and protect state institutions, according to 2 Syrian officials who spoke earlier Friday on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly. They said an agreement was reached, but later said the deployment was delayed, without giving an explanation. State media reported that Druze militias had carried out revenge attacks against Bedouin communities, leading to a new wave of displacement. The governor of neighboring Daraa province said in a statement that more than 1,000 families had been displaced to the area from Swayda as a result of attacks on Bedouin tribes by outlaw groups. The volunteer group Syrian Civil Defense said Friday that the head of its center in Swayda city had been kidnapped by gunmen 2 days earlier while on his way to evacuate a UN team. The official, Hamza al-Amran, was driving a van with the insignia of the organization, known as the White Helmets, when he was stopped by militants, the statement said. A person who answered his phone on Thursday said he was safe, it added, but they have been unable to reach him. The United Nations has been unable to bring in much-needed humanitarian and medical aid because of ongoing clashes. Tens of thousands displaced. The United Nations Migration Agency said Friday that nearly 80,000 people had been displaced altogether since clashes started on Sunday. It also noted that essential services, including water and electricity, have collapsed in Swayda. Telecommunications systems are widely disrupted, and health facilities in Swayda and Daraa are under severe strain. Meanwhile, there are severe disruptions to supply routes, with insecurity and road closures blocking aid deliveries. Adam Abdelmullah, UN resident and humanitarian affairs coordinator in Syria, said in a statement Friday. The World Health Organization was able to send trauma care supplies to Daraa province, but Swayda remains inaccessible, he said. Once conditions allow, we are planning to send a mission to assess needs and provide critical aid, in full coordination with authorities, Abdelmullah said. Swayda conflict draws in others. Bedouin groups and supporters arrived Friday from other areas of Syria to join the fight. On the outskirts of Swayda, groups of them gathered in front of buildings that had been set ablaze. An armed man, who gave his name only as Abu Maryam, father of Maryam, said he had come from the eastern province of Deir ez-Zor to support the oppressed. "We will not return to our homes until we crush al-Hijri and his ilk," he said, referring to a prominent Druze leader opposed to the government in Damascus, Sheikh Hikmat al-Hijri. "We have nothing to do with civilians and innocent people as long as they stay in their homes." Bedouins and Druze have clashed before the Druze religious sect began as a 10th century offshoot of Ismailism, a branch of Shiite Islam. More than half of the roughly 1 million Druze worldwide live in Syria. Most of the other Druze live in Lebanon and Israel, including in the Golan Heights, which Israel captured from Syria in the 1967 Mideast War and annexed in 1981. While predominantly Druze, Sweden is also home to Bedouin tribes who are Sunni Muslim and have periodically clashed with the Druze over the years. The latest escalation began with members of a Bedouin tribe in Sweden setting up a checkpoint and attacking and robbing a Druze man, which triggered tit-for-tat attacks and kidnappings. Ahmed Abazaid, a Syrian researcher who has studied armed groups in southern Syria, said there's no specific reason for the historic tensions between the groups. "All of Syria is full of social problems that have no reason," he said. In this case, however, the state exploited the latest problem to try to change the situation in Sweden, and this only increased the scope of it, he said. A Druze leader calls for unity in Israel. Members of the Druze community had called for intervention to protect the Druze in Syria. But elsewhere in the region, Druze leaders have rejected Israeli intervention. The spiritual leader of the Druze community in Lebanon, Sheikh Sami Abi al-Muna, said Friday at a gathering of Druze officials in Beirut that sectarian clashes in Syria give an excuse for Israeli intervention and for blowing up the situation in the region. "We do not accept to request protection from Israel, which we believe is harmful to our history and identity," he said. Al-Muna called for all parties to adhere to the ceasefire agreement reached Wednesday, and for a national dialogue to address the issues between different communities in Syria. Lebanese Druze leader Walid Jumblat, who had been one of the regional figures mediating the ceasefire, reached Wednesday at the same gathering, called for the formation of an investigative committee to investigate violations against both Druze and Bedouins in Syria. Please like and subscribe to wait for the next information. Goodbye and see you again.